Greetings and welcome to the lecture for Chapter 4, Family and Children's Services. Chapter 4 is talking about social work in the much needed area of child welfare. The history of child welfare goes as far back as slavery and an indentured servitude. Basically, after the Civil War, with the first wave of, there were a lot of orphan children. There were a lot of children of slaves who were in need of help, and there was a lot of need for intervention with the different populations who were underserviced. And this is what we look at first was black codes in Confederate states. The history of discrimination and poverty, especially against children. High child birth rates and high child death rates due to poverty and disease. We're talking about a time back when children only went to school oftentimes until they were 12 years old, and then they would be put to work in fields and then industry. When industry came around, children would be put to work in industry until too many children were seen to be dying, and that's when our child labor laws came into effect. Children were considered parental property and could be dealt with or done with whatever was needed. There was no laws in place to help protect the children. Poor laws, almshouses, and apprenticeships. Oftentimes, there were ways for someone to come up out of poverty was to go to work as an apprentice for really for no pay at all, just to learn the trade. They would go and work free labor for the trade, to learn the trade. And then that's where we see immigration and child labor. A lot of times before the child labor laws came about, there was a definite way where we saw children being taken advantage of in the workforce. Some early child welfare social work was the outdoor relief, which is assistance in the family home. New York Children's Aid Society, which were training schools, workshops, shelter, foster care, or farm labor. And foster care, when we talk about foster care here, we're looking at the back in the days before social work, or even early social work. Children who were orphaned went to an orphanage, and there was not as much of a wave. That is, if there was no family to take the child to begin to help take care of the child. If there was no family, then an orphanage would be the biggest way of dealing with those who didn't have parents, and the way there wasn't as much of a wave of adoption like there is today. We already talked about Freedmen's Bureau, education, employment, and direct poverty relief for former slaves. There was a wave, especially in northern states, to make sure that there was a fairness to, or at least an ability to offer some type of services. In the first lecture, we heard about the settlement house movement, and this is cooperative child care and self-help programs for families. This is the early work of social work. And then friendly visitors, in-home counseling for parents is another program that there was. Now let's look at real quick the history of child protection laws. Children's aid societies were early foster care and adoption programs. Around 1875, animal protection laws are used to protect children, and this is where Mary Ellen Wilson helped to develop, and she helped to work towards, lobbying towards laws in order to establish a need for protection of children so that they would not be used, more especially when we talk about dangerous labor or dangerous placement in the workforce. And that led to the 1909 White House Conference on Children, and what came out of that conference was the value families and foster care over institutional care. Like I was just talking to you about, that this wave of no longer having orphanages or institutions per se be the main outlet for children who didn't have families, but to look at more of a home atmosphere, or enhancing those who had an ability to adopt and be foster parents. Societies for Prevention of Cruelty of Children, and this is the private child abuse prevention organizations, or your major organizations which set out to see a major change in this. And then 1974, capital legislation of funding for child protection serves as Title 20 of the Social Security Administration. And these are the type of things that go in to say that if a child loses a parent to a accident or any type of death, that they will be eligible in most cases. And there's a lot of specifics to read in the book, covers this quite thoroughly, but there's a lot of provisions for that child to receive Social Security until the age of 18. So, UN Rights of the Child not ratified by the U.S., which is another thing we talked about in a previous chapter. But in 1978, there was a creation of state-regulated child protection agencies. This is where around the early mid-70s, late 70s, early 80s, where you see Child Protective Services become the major agency in each state's build-up organization. They have child protection and adult protective services, which we'll talk about in a later lecture. Child maltreatment is defined by those agencies. Mandated reporters of child maltreatment are identified, and that's where, under our license as clinicians, we have to follow the Texas Family Welfare Act, or the Texas Family Act, and there's Texas Family Code is what we have to follow as far as what is designated something that has to be reported. This is also where we're going to look at the distinction of roles between private voluntary agencies and public child welfare services. WIC, your food stamps, your TANF, your food aid to families. There's a different types of services that are available, and they're just sometimes they're private, sometimes they're voluntary, and sometimes they're public agencies. Integration of child protection and family preservation. This is going to be where you see that child protection is paramount, and in most cases, if there are issues in the family, that CPS is going to want to go in and correct those issues through education, and the goal is not always to remove the child from the home, however, to go in and help to regulate and help educate the home. Minimum necessary interference in family life. And really the goal of Child Protective Services is not to break the family apart, rather to make the family more whole and more solid as a result of these services. In many cases, we're talking about education services here. Here's a list of some of the different family preservation services, and prevention and early intervention are seen as, if we get the parents healthy, then the kids will also be healthy. TANF, Medicaid, food subsidies, housing assistance, and Medicaid is, we have what's called CHIPS in the state of Texas now, which is also a child health insurance program. Parent education and home visiting, in-home visiting, or home monitoring as it's also known as. Family and household management support, child care subsidy to allow parents to work in order to be more self-sufficient. Family counseling to resolve conflicts, which is where we come in. Investigation of reports of child maltreatment and permanency planning, and this is going to be where a case file is open, and then what is seen as the key word here is planning. A family plan will be developed to help to bring the issues, to correct the issues and bring the family back to a place of functioning. Adoption assistance for families who adopt children with special needs, and these are all family preservation services. Something that I've learned about over the past few years is something that's considered kindred adoption, and within CPS they have kindred services, and so family members of children who have either lost a loved one or have been abused by family members, CPS will oftentimes look at preferential treatment to a family member in an adoption case. Not always the case, but if they will go through a lengthy process of screening to be able to have the child placed with them. And there it is, number one at the top here, kinship care, and this is safe placement with a family of a relative, and this is out-of-home care. This is when children are not safe at home. Foster care is placement with a trained family. There are people who have anywhere from 4 to a dozen foster kids, and they may integrate those foster kids and then eventually adopt them after they've been placed in their home for a long time, and they'll integrate those foster kids with their biological children. Shelters, temporary professional care for runaway homeless children in abused homeless facilities. The big one here in Houston, of course, is Covenant House in the Montrose area. And then also there are plenty of other different levels and types of shelters and housing that are available for children. Institutional care, seriously emotionally and behaviorally disabled children requiring specialized services. We have Devereaux, we have Menninger. There's a lot of different specialized housing for those children who may have conduct issues, whether it could be from the spectrum of eating disorder all the way over to setting fires. And then detention, which is restrictive intervention to impact criminal behavior. There are several facilities in the greater Houston metropolitan area. The Katy Youth Academy, the Youth Village down in Seabrook, and then also the Burnett Bayland Reception Center, which is in Southwest Houston, which is where they have several specialized units. Poverty assistance and child welfare. Why public support of the children? Well, it's the future of the economic market. The children are the future, and its contribution to the common good. And it has a very good society underlining. There's a good well-being if a child is developed, mind, body, and spirit, and body being that they have the food, the nutrition, and supplement. If a child is developed in all of those areas, that they will go on to be positive, contributing members of society. The job of the childbearing is only valued if it can be accomplished with economic independence, and this is seen as a goal to help those who need assistance to be moved to a place where they will no longer need assistance. Public assistance is conditioned on working outside the home. Only 10 to 15% of families are better off with the implementation of TANF. So there is some limitations to this. Limitations would be that families become dependent on the help and may not have an awareness of ways to take care of these issues on their own, and of course the ultimate goal is to get people to a place of their own ability, or to get people to a place through assistance to be able to care for themselves long term. Poverty assistance and family planning. Poor women with Medicaid insurance do not have access to an abortion, and that is something that is controversial. We talked about it in class. I brought it up a few times already with the new Child Affordable Health Care Act from President Obama, that this is something that what you look at is still being debated. Some states have limited TANF if a woman has a child while receiving TANF in order to try and reduce those who would be having children just to receive services or just to receive benefits. Poor single women are encouraged to marry. Sound population measures are needed around the world to protect the planet from overpopulation, and then education, employment, and access to family planning leads to a decreased family size. And some of you might be thinking Planned Parenthood would be one of those agencies. Non-traditional families. This is opportunities for social workers. There's a new TV series on NBC called The New Normal, and it's talking about this. Same-sex couples may be discriminated against in that adoption process, limiting options for children in need of a permanent home. Multiracial families develop creative opportunities to promote healthy ethnic identities, and then immigrant families' roles may be reversed due to language, education, and employment needs. And this reminds me of where there may be a family where the parents have immigrated. The child may be the first in the family to learn English, and then will be the representative to the family and society when needing to take care of things. Here's some family policies, and this is the U.S. and how we rank statistically against in industrialized nations. The U.S. is 23rd in infant mortality, unpaid family and medical leave for employees of larger companies. Is offered women face pay inequality, sexual harassment, and family unfriendly workplaces. 12% of homeless are families with children, and then CEO worker compensation is 411 to 1. So CEOs or the executives in agencies are the 1% in society, which I'm sure many of you have already heard that. Other nations, there are nations like Denmark that have universal health care and universal child care. We're headed in that direction. With the current president, provide paid maternity leave and paternity leave, even for the fathers to be able to leave, to be there for the birth of their children for an extended period of time. Up to 10% unemployment in other nations. 1/3 of children born outside of marriage. And then worldwide we see CEO working compensation still way out of context here, 60 to 1 or better. This concludes the lecture on children and the chapter 4, and we'll see you in the next lecture.